LiSTNR production.
When you think about the various tasks and jobs available in policing, from commissioned officers to general duties officers, there are few roles that are as regularly in the front line as police dogs and their handlers. David Raymond has been a police dog handler for 26 years in the Queensland Police Force, most of those years in far north Queensland. He's joining us this week to give us an insight into what a dog handler deals with day in and day out. I'm former police officer Brent Sanders, and for the past 25 years, I've dedicated myself to sharing what I've learnt on the force to the Australian public so they can better protect themselves from falling victim to crime. So with the help of some of the most respected current and former detectives and high-ranking law enforcement agents, we're going to pull back the curtain on what life is like on the force and what they've learned about how crime and criminals really work. These are real stories from real detectives. David, firstly, mate, thank you so much for throwing your hat into the ring and, joining us for a bit of a chat. So, mate, you must have had quite a few years. If you joined 89, when did you start picking up the dog handling? That was sort of 2000 sometime, was it?
I started in the dog squad in 1999, so I had 26 years as a dog handler and all of the time in Cairns, of course. So I did general duties just before that, so I did 10 years as general duty police officer. And I was also part-time cert amongst that because back in those days we used to have part-time cert when they first came into operation. So they had 14 part-time members and 7 full-time members. And what actually happened was when they decided they wanted to get rid of the part-time members of cert and just go to a full-time unit, I had the opportunity then to go to cert, but my sights were set on the dog squad. So I decided I'd pass up that opportunity. Just as well, probably wouldn't be able to get through the course. But anyway, so I went to the dog squad and that's what made my decision.
And mate, you've had 5 working dogs, is that right, over your time in the squad?
That's right, I've had 5. Yeah, I'm on to my 5th now. And it's like a 50-year-old dealing with a 2-year-old kid. Trust me, you don't want to be there.
Just something I was interested in. I'm assuming there's a breeding program to provide these police dogs. Have your dogs in any way been, like if you get a great dog, and I know they're probably all great, but there's one in particular, that Vader that you mentioned quite a lot. Does he have like offspring that come through as, like with horses and horse racing and that type of thing? Does that, or am I sort of missing it there?
No, not at all. It's very funny, when I joined the dog squad in 1999, they basically said, okay, here's your new uniform, your dark uniform, here's your new belt, you're in the dog squad, go and find yourself a dog. So we would go to the media and put an ad in the paper and say, the police dog squad's looking for dogs. People would ring in and say, I've got this dog. We'd have specific traits. We wanted a dog that was really energetic, wanted to jump fences, wanted to dig holes, that type of stuff, the problem child for people. We go and have a look at the dog, assess it for its courage, it's not scared of loud noises, environmental thing, to be able to jump fences. Because that's what we were chasing. From there, we'd take a dog and take it down to Brisbane to get it trained. Now, obviously, over the last probably 15, 20 years, that's all changed now. So we've got our own breeding program, and the training staff down there at the academy are just amazing. They're just producing some of the most fantastic dogs because they're bred specifically for our tracking, our bite work, our agility, our obedience. So the quality in dogs has come along a lot since my first, although my first was great. But we worked with what we had, if that makes sense.
There's a lot of interest, there's a lot of general interest in the public with regards to police dogs because they sort of do go under the radar a bit. You see them and stuff, everyone's taken and intrigued by them, but we don't tend to know so much about them. Just how long would you have one dog working for? Would you get 5 years, 7 years out of a dog? How does that work?
Generally speaking, 5 to 7, that's correct, 5 to 7 years. We take them at about 2 years of age or just under 2 years of age. They get on the road about 2 years of age, and we run them through to 7, 8. So we do get 5, 6, 7 years. I think we tend to get a little bit more in the regional areas, and only that's because we don't really want to spend the next 3 months in Brisbane. So we tend to try and stretch ours out a little bit. But generally speaking, we get the 5 to 7 years out of the dogs.
And once the dogs, I guess the handler makes a call on it, that the work is getting a bit tough for the dogs as they're getting older, then they retire the dogs, I guess. And what's that process? What happens to that dog that was working with you yesterday? Now he's retired. What happens to him or her?
Yeah, it's a funny situation. When I lost my last dog, Axel, it's almost like you don't have time to grieve for the dog. All pets and police dogs are, the closest thing to you sometimes. You lose your dog Friday and Monday you're down getting a new dog, so you don't actually have time to grieve, you know what I mean, when they pass away whilst working. But with retirement, generally speaking, the handler will take the dog on because it's part of the family, if you know what I mean. So I think, I hate to try and tell her, my wife's probably going to listen to this and really know the exact figure, but I think we spent, between $6,000 and $7,000 trying to keep my last retired police dog alive for the last 12 months of his life. We just spent a lot of money trying to keep him there because he was just such part of the family.
So the older dog stays at home, and then the new dog comes into the environment, the 2-year-old, and that could be interesting too, I guess, at times, where the old fella that's been the number one there for a while, suddenly he's been superseded by this shiny new version coming in through the door.
Yeah, listen, we have 2 kennels in the back of a vehicle, so quite often if the retired dog is still capable, we'll often take that dog out because they learn from each other, if you know what I mean. So they'll sit beside the kennel, and if a person comes up to the back of the car, and all the police have been there, but if a person comes up behind the car, the old dog will bark, and that'll teach the younger dog, okay, well, I've got a thing here, because, and generally speaking, what happens is if a person comes up behind a car, the first thing I do is flinch and get a bit of a fright from the dog barking, and that gives the dog that bit of bravado and goes, oh yeah, well, I've won, so the younger dog's learning off that, and that's generally how we speak. In fact, one job I remember when I first got Vader, I really struggled with the way he was tracking, because it's all dogs are so different. And this new dog Vader was just driving me up the wall. So I went to an offence where a person had been robbed in their own home. I turned up and I knew I wasn't having a success with Vader. I had him about 3 months and just wasn't having any success. And so I pulled the old dog out, Zed, who wasn't at that time, and I can tell this story because I'm nearly retired. But so I took Zed out and put him on the track and located an offender. So, and of course the media got hold of it, because we deal with the media a fair bit here and we're fairly media savvy. They thought, oh, this is fantastic, Vader's first location. So of course it made the media with Vader standing there doing nothing and Zed sitting in the background thinking he was unlucky, he did all the work. So yeah.
Now, it's funny you say that, mate, about that walking past the wagons with the dogs. I had 2 years, I was in the riot squad, and we shared the same base as the dog squad. You'd think you'd sort of know, after 2 years, but the number of times I got sprung, like just, you park your car, you're in a bit of a daydream, you might be thinking about something else, and you walk, you get within sort of 2 meters of that dog van, and bang, off it goes. And they got me every time. We all know too that, as a copper, you can be dealing with an aggressive individual and they're sort of arcing up and all set to take the world on, and then suddenly the dog handler will arrive with the dog, and they're just like, oh, okay, fair cop, all over, because nobody wants to take those dogs on, do they, in those type of situations?
Oh, exactly. We just had extra use of force to turn up, and we've been involved in many incidents where just the presence of the dog, and obviously that's one of the use of force that we use in the police, as you know, with the situation use of force model, is presence, and having that police dog turn up is just an amazing thing. My kids used to come home to me all the time, and they'd see something on TV where they'd say, hey, on the news it come that an offender had handed themselves into the police station, and they'd say, how can they hand themselves in if they're on the run, thinking they're baddies, and they're going to run? I explained to them that everybody hands themselves in. Now, whether that's, 10 hours after the offence, or whether it's 2 seconds before the police dog bites them, they still hand themselves in at some stage. They always go, no, I'm here, sir, that type of stuff, and but I said to them, there's just a certain amount of time that it's too late. There is a line where it says it's too late for you to hand yourself in. And that's probably the reason why I haven't got that many bites. I've been bitten by the police dog. I know what it feels like, and I really don't wish that on even some of the worst offenders I've got, because it does really hurt. Just a quick story on that, getting scared by a police dog. I've still got this gentleman in Cairns who wanders around the streets, and he often sees a police car parked, come and he'll come to my side window and he say, "Hey, sir, can I get a lift to such and such place?" "Yeah, mate, jump in the back." So he wanders out the back. He lifts up the back and the dog barks at him again. And he wanders back to him. He says, "Hey, Sarge, you got me again, mate. You got me again." So I get him every single time. It's just the funniest thing.
Now, just it's probably a nerdy question, but with the police dogs, male or female, or does it not matter, or is there one that works better in certain capacities than others, or no difference at all?
Yeah, I would suggest we'd probably have 90, at a guess, 95% male dogs. It's no different to the human life where they've just got that aggression, that natural aggression. But a lot of the female dogs they use for drug detection because they're very meticulous in what they do. So so most of them are females.
We'll move on shortly to some of your particular or hands-on experiences that you've had as a handler, David, but you've had general purpose dogs, which are the dogs that I guess are most high profile that folks will see, in like or similar to the iCars. But there's detection dogs, explosive dogs, there's the special emergency response team dogs. So a range of different roles and different breeds too, I think, come into some of those different areas, don't they, where am I right in saying the general purpose dogs are pretty much exclusively German Shepherd?
They are. A lot of people are using Mals, but Malinois and that type of stuff, but we use a lot of German Shepherds here. I think originally down the track when they decided the breeding program, we had to decide what type of dog we wanted. We decided to go with the German Shepherd, which is what we do. So with the breeding program, we get mostly Shepherds.
And so at any one time, I'd imagine there's probably, I'm just looking at a bit of a breakdown here. So how many dogs in Queensland would be working across sort of general purpose, those detection dogs, and how many dogs on the go in Queensland state?
Look, I would have to guess at that, but I'd say about 80. If I sat down, I could work it out, but probably about 80, I'd say that are around working in service at any one time.
David, police dogs and handlers respond to a wide variety of jobs across a typical 10-hour shift. In fact, you yourself have been first on scene at a couple of homicides with the dogs that you've worked with. Can you have a bit of a chat to us about that?
Yeah, it's unfortunately part of the job. And being a dog handler, I'd expect it's the same in the southeast corner, but most of the staff are very experienced, so they've had a long time on the road. We have a very junior staff up here in North Queensland. So we generally asked by the comms section to go to any major incident first up. Either that might be to provide support or actually to run the job initially before the more experienced police get there. So So I remember one night working when I got a call to go over to a unit in at a unit just outside of the city in Cairns, where a young girl had been stabbed by her father, father. I'm not quite sure how it worked out there. When I got there, she was laying inside the room there, inside the unit. And I had a feeling that the ambos had actually pulled back because they were too concerned. They were worried about what was going on in there. So I went straight in there, checked for a pulse, and she had been deceased at that stage, still with the murder weapon in her. I then protected the ambos whilst they came in, and they managed to remove the deceased from there. But I just had a feeling that he was quite possibly in there. And we do a thing called a building search with the dogs, where a dog will go inside a building or a house or whatever it is, and we'll methodically do a search. And if they locate someone, whether they're hiding under a bed or they might be hiding in a room, they might be hiding even in the ceiling at times. I found people in the ceilings sometimes because the dog's got such a great sense of smell. So the deceased had been removed. I put the dog through, and it's a bit scary because what had also happened is at that stage, the offender actually doused the unit in petrol. So you could imagine having a dog there with your firearm out, worried about trying to, trying to locate an offender. If you had to fire a shot, you've got to worry about the muzzle flash, or if you had your taser, you've got to worry about the sparks and the whole place igniting. So there's a whole lot of stuff that comes into your mind when you're trying to think of these things. And these are vivid memories because obviously it's not something you go to every day. And anyway, so I did a search of this thing, and I come to the back of this, the back corner of the unit, and the toilet and bathroom doors were tied up with a rope outside. A bit scary to think what was going to happen in there. And so I gave that. We usually, before we do a search with the dogs, whether it be into the house or whether it be in a separate room, I gave the command, police with a police dog, you don't come in, you'll get bitten. I sent the dog through to do the search. When I come to that room, the dog was indicating that there was somebody inside that room. Took a deep breath, stood back, undid the wire because there was a rope tying both handles, the toilet door handle and the external handles and the bathroom handle together, tied that up. I undid that rope, still holding on to my dog beside me, and I kicked open the door, the first toilet door, and there was nothing in there. So I then turned around to the bathroom door, gave another yell because the dog was indicating on there. I cracked that one open. It was actually the second child who was in there. From what I can gather, the offender had decided he was going to torch the whole place and leave her in there. So we got in the nick of time. We didn't find the offender. He, as I said before, he handed himself in, to the police a bit later on once we knew that he was on the go. So yeah, just from memory, it's a good job to be involved in, if you know what I mean. I mean, any police officer likes to be involved in those things, but not a very nice thing to plant in your memory.
Just a couple of things on that too, that which are really interesting. The dog has detected that there is somebody in a room, and you're thinking, of course, it could well be the offender. In this case, it was a sibling of the girl that had been murdered. That brings in another dynamic, doesn't it? That the dogs themselves can't detect whether the person that's in that room, if you open the door and the dog goes in, whether they're a young girl or whether an offender or who they are. That's an interesting conundrum to find yourself in. Did you yourself think it was the offender that was in that room, or did you think it was another family member prior to going in?
Oh, I was sure it was an offender. Absolutely sure it was the offender. But that's all part of it. In this particular case, a lot of times we let the dog out just on his own to go and do a search, a methodical search right through the building or through the house. This time I had the dog on a lead because I was worried about what I might find. I didn't want the dog to get hurt as well. So that was a pretty important thing. If there's an armed offender in there, you don't really want to send your dog to his certain death. So if I had him on the lead, I was able to pull him back if necessary and get him out of danger. So in this time I had him on lead, so I very carefully opened it up. If it had been the offender and he was there and he was unarmed, then obviously the dog would have got his go. But generally speaking, if people come up against an angry dog, doesn't matter what they're like, they're usually going to give themselves up.
I'm interested, David, when you're in that house, there's, you've got a deceased person in the house, you've potentially got the offender there. It's a very high pressure situation. The dogs are aware that they're sort of sensing from you as well, I guess, at a job and things such as that. What's the demeanor of the dog in the house at a job like that? And how are you communicating with it? Are you talking with it? And I'm just really interested in that dynamic.
Absolutely. When I go to a job, say for instance, we're going code 2 to a job where all of a sudden they say, okay, well, you're code 2 or you've got an armed offender. The first thing I start thinking is when I'm driving the car is I start thinking about, okay, what's the safest route to go? I've got to make sure I've got my vest on. I've got to make sure I've got firearms there, tasers there, and all these things are going through my head. While I'm doing this, obviously I'm having an adrenaline dump. The dog in the back starts crying because he knows he's going to a job. It's just an amazing, amazing dynamic. They know they're going to a job. They get excited. So it's very similar there. And a number of times we both looked at one another. We've been at the doors or searching cane paddocks or something like that with an armed offender. We looked at one another and we both had this look in our faces if you're sure about this, So they feed off the handler and the handler feeds off the dog. It's same with, rappelling out of a helicopter or something like that. If I feel comfortable coming out of the helicopter on a line with the dog feels comfortable as well. So it's, it's very much feeling off each other.
You were first on scene with that particular homicide. I think reading through some of the notes that you kindly sent through, David, there was another situation where a suspect with regard to homicide escaped police custody, and I think you and one of the dogs actually tracked that person and located them. Could you relay that to us?
Yes, that's right. One of the beach suburbs, we had a young fellow who had his life taken by a couple of other younger people. The deceased wasn't found for a couple of days. From there, we got good intel, as we do. With the detectives got good intel, and as police dog handlers, our role in that is just to set up cordons. So we worked out that the offender was at this specific location, the south of Cairns. We had a dog at the front, in a unit block. We had a dog at the front, dog at the back. and the detectives did their thing. And we were there, obviously. If they did a runner, then we'd get to chase them down with the dog, either through tracking or, if necessary, they weren't going to stop, we'd send them in to do the bite to bring them before the court. So on this particular case, we went down to that address and the detectives did their work and there was nobody there. But we got a bit of information that there was another address we went to. Obviously, it's something like that. We set up a little plan. We had a look at a map on Google Maps. We decided where we were going to put the dogs and where we were going to get this house, because this was a residence only about a couple of k's away from where we were. So we set up these cordons again. And just as I'm setting up the cordon, the CIB in an unmarked car have driven towards this address. And from there, they've seen one of the offenders jump out of the vehicle and do a runner down a driveway and straight over a fence into another yard. And of course, they were smart thinking they stopped. Now, I had to decide, because where the offender ran was coming directly to my cordon. And I thought to myself, do I dump the cordon and just hope that he goes to ground, or do I bring the dog around and track to where he's hidden? Or do I wait there and wait for him to come into the cordon? But I decided I'd go around and see if I could get a track off that. With dogs, and you've got to know a fair bit about dogs to be a decent dog handler. So I knew this was a really fresh track, if that makes sense. So there's a whole lot of scent around, and the dog will run really, really fast in that scent. If the track's an hour old, or, an hour and a half or 2 hours old, the dog's really got to put its nose down and start following that track. Usually with that type of age on the track, it's very methodical and tracks a lot slower. This one was only probably 3 or 4 minutes old by the time I got there. It was Vader at that stage. I got the Vader out the back of the truck. He was straight onto it, absolutely straight onto it. We then hit a 6-foot high fence, which we jumped over the top of. We started tracking through another yard, across the timber patio or the timber deck that they had it there, and then the dog indicator on a bush, which is at the back of the yard. I once again had my firearm out, dog in one hand. The dog was going off his head, of course. He was really, really cranky, because the feeling of a person who is dealing with a dog that's barking, there's a big adrenaline dump. So, and the dog knows he's having a win there. So the dog will continue barking, want to get into there. Before I could make a command, come out of the bushes, because I knew it was there. There was just so much scent around there. Before I could give the command, he's yelled out. He said, "Okay, I'm coming out." So he came out, and we had one offender in custody for that. So it was once again a great job, because we have an offender off the streets that could have been, how long? And we'll probably touch on a story later on where an offender, is out for 12 years, and who knows what happens in that type of stuff. So it was a great job.
Coming up, a fugitive has been on the run for more than a decade, and David is on the front line in a search that goes down to the wire. David, 1922, one of the country's most wanted fugitives, a guy by the name of Graham Potter, had been on the run for over 12 years. You were quite instrumental in his location and capture. Can you just have a chat to us about this case?
The night before, we'd received a bit of information that Graham Potter, who'd been, as you said, on the run for 12 years, he had been convicted and served his time for a homicide in Victoria. Then he got himself tied up with drug importation. So obviously wanted by police, and also wanted by some of the criminal organisations around the world. So that's how deep he was into it. So he just disappeared, and the police have been chasing him for quite a while. He had been seen in the township of Tully a few years after that, 6 or 7 years after his original takeoff, run away. And the police actually gave chase, but were unable to catch him. So we got information this particular night that quite possibly is hiding out at an address in Ravenshoe. These little outback places seem to attract these people. We decided that we'd get a whole lot of police officers together to go up there and have a search. He had a history of violence, so we were a bit concerned about what would happen. So we decided we'd get a CERT team involved, as well as Detective Crime Squad. Unfortunately, both those units were unavailable, and the detective in charge decided we'd go up anyway. So I decided I'd go up and give them a hand. In this particular case, it was just a high-set house. When we walked in, we spoke to a female who said she met us downstairs, which is, being a policeman for 36 years, straight away the things you start ringing bells, and going, well, I'm guessing there's somebody hiding upstairs. But she swore black and blue there was nobody hiding up there. When we went upstairs, it was the most horrible place. I mean, if you've ever seen hoarding and those shows on hoarding, this was next level, just incredible. In fact, one of the rooms that we went into, there was only 30 centimetre gap between the rubbish and the ceiling. That's how much rubbish was in those. It was a 3 or 4 bedroom house, and most of the rooms were exactly like this. It was just absolutely horrible. So we did a search through there, all the detectives, myself, keeping in mind that possibly he was armed. He had committed a murder before, so it was a pretty dangerous thing. I brought the dog out to put him upstairs, and when I went upstairs, there were all these little puppies running around. There were cats everywhere. There were dogs, as well as the rubbish. There's all these other hazards that we had in there, so the dog was a bit of a waste of time. After a little while, we'd done most of the searching through the house, and the police and the detectives decided that was enough, but I stayed back with the detective. I said, he's got to be here somewhere, got to be here somewhere. And I think being a police dog handler, you tend to do a lot of searching anyway. So, and you just have that gut feeling. So I did a bit of a search, and I thought, am I going to be able to go through that rubbish pile in these rooms? And I decided I'd have to eventually go through them. But as it turns out, I went to one of the bedrooms that wasn't so cluttered, and up on the bed, hiding behind the mattress, was this wanted person, Graham Potter. So, yeah, I was just right place, right time, and just finding somebody after, spending 12 years on the run was the most amazing feeling. It was such a good feeling.
I understand he'd been at that particular residence for quite some time, but in a small country regional town, nobody had seen him, obviously just living almost like the life of a hermit for a period of time. Did he give himself up freely without any drama?
Yeah, apart from giving the false name, but I have a feeling it's also that I'll find I don't have to keep looking over my shoulder all the time. But when you say he was living like a hermit, I don't think he was. I think he was going in and out of town and going to the news agency and shops and stuff like that within Ravenshoe, because it tends to be a bit out of the road, and probably if you don't make yourself stand out, you won't stand out too much. But as I say, apart from giving a false name, he was pretty relieved to be located.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, isn't it? You're on the run for 12 years. You'd be constantly on edge thinking that next knock at the door, that patrol car that drives past does a U-turn, they're coming back for you. So possibly a feeling of relief. So he would have been, I'd imagine, because he was wanted by Victorian police, some of his alleged crimes were involving sort of some of those Melbourne gangland types down there. So he would have been extradited back down to Melbourne, I'd imagine, as a result of that capture and charged accordingly.
That's right. It was an importation of drugs through a tomato tinge, from what I can gather. Obviously, a bit of a tip-off, and the whether Border Force or AFP or whoever got a hold of the information and made the arrest from there. But I think because they'd got into the country, the overseas organisations were saying, well, we didn't sell those drugs to police, we sold them to you, so where are they? So you're responsible for them, if you know what I mean. So he was on the run from everybody, I think, more than anything.
Once you have a case like that, you obviously write that up and forward that documentation forward, but you wouldn't have really much in the way of involvement of giving evidence. As a dog handler, have you ever had to sort of present a brief of evidence from any of the cases you've been involved in, or is that evidence just provided in court without you having to attend?
I think I've been to court probably 2 or 3 times since I've been a dog handler, and that's the 26 years. They tend to believe, because we are experts in our field, if you know what I mean, the way I talk about dogs and the way I talk about tracking and the length of the track and the age and, fresh tracks, it's a bit hard to refute the evidence when you've dealt with that type of stuff. So we do statements, and very, very rarely do they require us to give evidence, which is a good thing, because my son's a criminal defence lawyer, so I don't really want to go against him because he's pretty witty too, so I want stay away from that.
Well, that makes for some interesting chat around the Christmas table. And like you say, somebody with that experience, you're not a particularly good target for a defence lawyer in the stand, are you? They're not going to be able to pick apart your technique tracking an offender or something such as that.
No, generally speaking, they leave us alone. And at the end of the day, we do know what we're doing. We do have that the knowledge, so it's probably something. I mean, we probably the lower end of the food chain with regards to trying to find a defence for an offender.
David, another important role that police dogs perform is searching for people who wish to harm themselves. Can you just discuss with us that aspect of the work that you've done with your dogs?
Yeah, that's probably a a role that is not so publicised. Everybody goes to the fetes and the shows and stuff like that and sees the dog run down and chase an offender with that sleeve on, and that's the big bite work scenario. But the amount of people that we find that want to commit self-harm, keep in mind that it's sad that in Australia we have our suicide rate twice what our road toll is. It's a sad statistic. It's something I know the amount of money they spend on, road safety campaigns, but when you come to talk about suicide, it's a taboo subject for some reason. That's obviously not working. If it doubles our road toll, then we probably need to change our thoughts about that. But just when it comes back to the role of and just on that, I just came back from Cambodia of all places. I was helping train the landmine detection dogs over there. They got all the dogs but no knowledge, so they look out for handlers around the world to give them a hand. So I went over there. Now their suicide rate is a quarter of ours, and they got nothing. These people, they got nothing, but they're just happy people. And it makes me wonder why over here in Australia we have everything, and yet our suicide rate is massive. It's really something that I think we've got to look at. It's very dear to my heart. Not that I've lost anybody to suicide, but I've been to a lot and I just see it wrecking families all the time. And in saying that, I have tracked quite a few. I couldn't count them by now. I'd be going to in the teens over the last 25 years, the amount of people I've tracked. And in fact, 3 that I can think of that come to mind have actually, talk about suicide, cutting them down because they'd been hanging themselves at the time, and given CPR and brought 2 of them back. So they wouldn't be here today if it hadn't been for those police dogs. There was another instance where I found a young girl who had decided that she'd had enough, and she went to the bush and she took a whole heap of medication. It took us about an hour and a half. And what was scary was there was a big croc that was just on the side of the creek there, just waiting to gobble either her up or me up or the dog up. I'm not sure what it was. And of course, the dog decides that it's going to, it's not scared of anything, so it decides to take on this croc. So I have to be careful of that as well. There are all these other added pressures and places like that in North Queensland or anywhere, there's snakes. In fact, I'll be bitten by red-bellied black a few years ago when I was doing a track. So there's all these little dangers around. But in this particular case, we searched the bushland. We had absolutely no idea. But the dog does a thing called wind scenting. So after a certain amount of time, there's you can't track anymore because the track's a little bit old. So the dog does something called wind scenting, where the dog will put its nose in the air. Instead of putting its nose down and following a track, it'll just follow the scent of the wind. So if we're downwind from where the person is hiding or person is injured, the dog will put its nose in the air, it'll put its tail up, it'll start smelling around. And that's where the handler comes into watching that dog and its reaction and its change of behaviour. And from there, we can generally work out where the person is. In this particular case, we went past the person the first time because I saw a croc there and I thought, I'm not going to go anywhere near there. So I pulled the dog back, but the dog desperately wanted to go there. So we came back to there about 10 minutes later. And then the dog was dead set, wanted to go that way. And I thought, I'll give him a bit of rope, He jumped over a log, and that's where we found the female. And I actually got a phone call from the doctor the next day to say that we within minutes of her, losing her life. So again, the dogs are just fantastic in what they do in locating these people.
Now, David, your 36 years in the job is fast approaching that last day that you'll pull on the old Queensland Police uniform. You're stepping back, retiring in September this year, but you've got a lot of things on the go, one of which I just wanted to have a quick chat about is a book that is, I think, coming out. It may have come out or it's shortly coming out, called Vader, which I'm picking as named after one of the dogs that you've mentioned throughout our chat. Can you tell us a bit about the book?
Yeah, well, ever since I started in the police, the first day I arrived in Cairns in 1989, I was asked to go down to one of the main streets of Cairns and write tickets out to people for don't walk signs, believe it or not. And I got snapped by a photographer there. That was my very first day, and I kept that photo. And ever since then, I've kept a little scrap. And I apologise to those people 30 years ago or 36 years ago for doing that. But as a first-year connie, you go, yeah, this is great, I'll go and do that. But since then, I've kept a diary and a log of everything I've done. So if it made the media, I cut the newspaper clipping out. I also, if I went to any jobs, I'd write a little story about it, that type of stuff. So sit in the police car and jot down a little story on the laptop about what happened. So I eventually put those all in together as a book, just for the family, like a lot of people do. And then they suggested that I send it down to a publisher. So I did, which was Big Sky Publishing. And they, within a week, they back to me saying they want the book. So it was, I really wrapped with that type of stuff. And it actually comes out September 3rd, the same day I retire. So it works in pretty well. So I can't get into trouble if there's anything in there. Not that there is anything against the QPS. The QPS has been fantastic to me, and I'm actually very complimentary in the book to the QPS for giving me such a great career and such a great life.
That's a great story, mate. And look, it's no mean feat to send something through to a publishing house and have it accepted, because, the majority of things that they get sent are rejected. So for them to get back to you so quickly, and it's going to be, you're going to be able to walk into a bookshop up there in Cairns and see your name on the cover of a book, mate. That's a job well done. Also, David, you founded an organisation called Project Recognise. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, well, you probably see by my CV there, I've been very lucky. There's a lot of luck involved in receiving award nominations and stuff like that. So, and over my career, I've received a few, quite a few. But even some of those big awards from the Governor General, I would put in my top 10 jobs probably. Probably some of the jobs I've done a little bit better and received no recognition for it, which I see a lot going on, that people aren't getting recognised for the work they're doing, especially amongst emergency service workers. And so through the QPS, I started a little organisation. A couple of people were talking around the hallway, as they do, about one of my staff that had done a great job. And I thought, I missed that. And I've only got 5 or 6 staff. So I thought, if I miss that, what are the people with 60, 70, 80, 100 staff? They're missing all this type of information. So I decided I'd set up this little recognised project, so as I'd make sure that nothing's missed. So within the organisation, I said to people, if you see any good work, send it directly to me. I'm not one of the bosses. I'm not one of the, because everybody's suspicious of the bosses, whereas they're back there, we've got great bosses. So they don't want to send this type of stuff, or they don't want to big note themselves or whatever. So I said, if you hear of anything or see anybody get anything, please send me an email and I'll action it either through a good work email, or if it has to go higher to the Governor General's office or Honours and Awards Committee, then I'll send it through to there. So what happened from there is we were able to do something like 150 good work, what we call development performance acknowledgements within the first 6 months. And these are 150 that would have been missed from people. We also forwarded, I think, 25 reports involving 44 officers to the Honours and Awards Committee to say, look, they've done this great job. So we managed to get these a little bit higher to get that further acknowledgement. And some of these are fantastic jobs. 2 people drowned out one of the water holes here, and these 2 police just jumped straight in after them after 2 people had drowned, and to look for other people that have gone in there. That's who does that type of stuff. And these people probably would have missed, not recognised, how we had no operation, the recognised project. So I decided it was working well within my organisation, so I took it outside the organisation to the civilian world. And from there, it worked really well in Cyclone Jasper. Basically it was a projectrecognise.com.au. It's a website. So people can get on there and nominate people for any activity, whether that's volunteers at the airport that are welcoming guests, or whether it's somebody who, one of the ones comes to mind where they've jumped into a river and they've, dragged somebody out of a flooded river. Doesn't really matter what the feat is. We want to be able to acknowledge them and let them know that we're thinking of them, because recognition doesn't get handed around enough. It's just my good way of gives me a good feeling to know that I've done this for these people. So so it's called Project Recognise. We were lucky enough to recognise about 330 individuals and businesses in the recent Cyclone Jasper and flooding event that happened in North Queensland. And they were all had science certificates from our federal member, Warren Edge, federal member at the time, Warren Edge, and just a really nice certificate with the coat of arms on, something you really display in there. So it's just our way of saying, hey, we appreciate your service. And that'll be ramping up once I retire. I'll be able to spend a lot more time in that and really try and get that nationwide if we can.
Good on you, David. Look, it sounds like you're going to have plenty on your plate come September when you finally hang up the dog lead, mate, for the last time. Can I just say, Dave, I want to thank you so much for taking the time to have a chat to us here today. Only the second dog handler that we've had on Crime Insiders, and I was so looking forward to spending a bit of time with you. David, yours has been a very storied career. 36 years of service, 26 of that as a dog handler, 15 as officer in charge of the dog squad up there in Cairns. You've been the recipient of 15 or 16 awards and commendations. You come to the end of your service in September, having been a wonderful servant to the good people of Queensland and Cairns, David. So thank you so much for your time, and I look forward to the book coming out, and I want to wish you all the very best in retirement.
Well, I'm sure there's a copy, Brent, for you, and thanks very much. I appreciate the invitation.
Our guest this week was David Raymond, a Queensland police officer who served 26 years as a police dog handler. David's book Vader is out first week of September. Join us next week for another episode of Crime Insiders Forensics. I'm Brent Sanders, with sound design by Niall Fernandez. This series was recorded and produced on Gadigal land.